82. Currently, we have 69 degrees at O'Hare. Next news coming up at 9. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by Get Down to Business with Shalom Klein, the show for business and jobs powered by Tandem HR. Heard Sunday evenings at 6.
If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. David Mastio is the deputy editorial page editor of USA Today. Given that, a somewhat remarkable piece, or it's remarkable that he's in that position. He opines about abortionist Ulrich Klopfer, the recently deceased abortionist out of Will County who had clinics in Indiana, who had his license suspended by the Indiana Medical Board, whose property was found to have 2,200 plus fetuses medically contained.
Yeah, they were medically sealed in plastic bags, then put in cardboard boxes. But on the bag, I've been told, is the name of the mother who had the abortion, and then the date.
David Mastio, writing in USA Today, there's something sick in America's abortion industry. What else would account for a doctor who collected thousands of dead babies in some kind of twisted hobby that he hid from his allegedly unsuspecting wife? And he points out that this is not the first such incident, as we have pointed out, as our audience certainly knows. It calls to mind, as many people have compared, and we have as well, Kermit Gosnell in Philadelphia.
Because he was a hoarder, too, just like him.
But it also raises other questions, the media coverage of the issue. At his request, David Mastio writes, the Media Research Center looked into coverage of Klopfer and found little interest. No coverage on the nightly broadcast news, nothing on MSNBC, a story on CNN, a few on Fox News, national newspapers each handle it with one or two stories.
Well, I give NBC5 credit because they did lead with it one of the nights, and so did Michelle Giardo from Channel 7 did a report.
Gosnell, also last month we reported this, not many other people did. Planned Parenthood Arizona ordered to pay $3 million to a whistleblower fired after she reported that a doctor appeared to be making medical mistakes resulting in complications for patients at one of Planned Parenthood's unregulated, I add parenthetically, facilities in Arizona.
Oh, really?
There's a lot to be curious about, writes David Mastio. He talks, reports another case in which a doctor who owned clinics had his medical license temporarily suspended, relinquished or revoked, and had previously faced criminal charges in New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Florida, and California. A lot to be curious about. How does a doctor get in trouble in 5 states and yet remain an abortionist in other states that claim to care about women? Why would Planned Parenthood fire a 15-year employee, the whistleblower, rather than address concerns for patient safety? How does a doctor amass enough dead babies in his garage to do a passable imitation of a World War II mass grave? Didn't his employees notice he was taking home baby parts? Well, that was the other one of the other reports on the mills that Klopfer worked in, that the staff, much like Gosnell, was largely undertrained, if trained at all. So there's some gruesome news against that backdrop. Abortions fall to the lowest level since Roe v. Wade became law. It's still 862,000 abortions. I mean, think about losing the population of a mid-sized city in this country. 862,000 abortions performed in the United States in 2017, according to the Guttmacher Institute, which is pro-abortion. That number is down significantly from the numbers the group reported in 2014.
Well, yeah, because women can just take the day after pill.
Well, it's the lowest rate since the Roe v. Wade decision, the 2017 number. So, there's an education. This is a hearts and minds issue, and there's an education that goes on as well. And perhaps cases like Gosnell and Klopfer will help people or force people to connect dots that they know are there. Ross Douthat writing in the New York Times about Mayor Pete, Mannequin Pete, that mannequin from the men's department at the Macy's in Mishawaka, who has refused comment other than to be supportive of these mills that Klopfer worked at, including one in his hometown of South Bend. The unapologetic grisliness of a Klopfer or a Kermit Gosnell before him haunts a Buttigiegian abortion politics more than it does a safe, legal, rare triangulation, because it establishes the most visceral of contrasts between the mysticism required to believe that right to life begins at birth and the cold and obvious reality that what our laws call a non-person can still become a corpse.
Well, Mayor Pete did finally speak out late last night, and this is what he said, Dan. Like everyone, I find the news out of Illinois extremely disturbing. I think it's important to be fully investigated, blah, blah, blah. This is a juicy part. I also hope it doesn't get caught up in politics at a time when women need access to health care. There's no question that what happened is disturbing, it's unacceptable, and it needs to be looked into fully.
Mm-hmm.
End of comment.
The most visceral of contrasts, Douthat's words, between the mysticism required to believe that the right to life begins at birth and the cold and obvious reality that what our laws call a non-person can still become a corpse. Reconcile that statement, that contrast, Mayor Pete. And, you're going to have to come up with a doozy of a biblical verse to do so. For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by Andrew Clavin, of course, famed Hollywood screenwriter, the screenwriter who wrote the Gosnell movie. Also, he's a podcaster. His podcast, Another Kingdom, is in its second season. Andrew, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Looks like we have another screenplay for you to write.
God, I hope not. I've dealt with this as much as my nightmares can take. But you're absolutely right. Look, a doctor can basically go into any field he wants. A guy at that professional level can choose his field and do the kinds of things that he enjoys doing. So ask yourself, who becomes an abortion doctor? It's going to be the people who enjoy doing what they're doing. And I think that raises the question, and it's raised in the movie, the Gosnell movie, what is the difference between an evil abortion doctor and a good abortion doctor? I mean, really, it's only a sense of habits, the kind of habits of like not preserving, not keeping souvenirs. It's not about what you're actually doing. You're actually doing the same thing. That line you just read from USA Today, I'm sorry I didn't catch the name of the writer, but that's a brilliant line. It's a brilliant line because it highlights the fact, and I talk about this on my podcast all the time, once you embrace a false idea, you are on the road to hell, because what you have to do is you have to keep reinforcing that idea with other false ideas. So you start out by saying that this is not a human life. And by the time you're finished, you're shouting your abortion. There are people who have now fetishes where they get pregnant on purpose so they can have the abortion as a sexual fetish. There are, people who are sort of encouraging this as a way of life. And once you just accept that false idea, you're done for if you don't turn back and say, I was wrong, and say, no, that's a false idea. So we have to keep reminding people that this is not about women's health, which is a euphemism. It's not about a woman's right to choose, which has nothing to do with it. It is about the life of the smallest person in an abortion room, which is the baby, who deserves to live the same as you or me. There is absolutely no excuse for eliminating that life. I mean, obviously, in the very, very, very rare case where you might have to choose between one life and another, you've reached a tragic moment, but that's not what's happening.
Well, no,
As
I wanted
somebody
to ask you,
said,
yeah. Oh, sorry.
yeah.
Go on.
Recently, the Planned Parenthood woman in Missouri said every reason to have an abortion is a good reason. So that includes eliminating a girl instead of a boy. That includes wanting your kid to be a Pisces instead of a Libra. That is where they've gotten following that bad idea.
Well, and Gosnell, did he keep the baby? Like, I remember vividly the baby feet in jars. Was that as a trophy, or what was that fetish? I don't understand.
Yeah, serial killers keep trophies. They keep trophies so that they can go back and relive the experience, and that's what it seems to be. And, remember that movie got its start when one of the producers, Phelan McAleer, happened to be in town during the trial, and he went to visit the trial, and he noticed the press box was empty. Just like with this story, the press didn't cover it Why didn't the press cover it? Because the only way to cover up a bad idea is silence and lies. That's how you do it. And so once these things bring the truth, I mean, this is the truth. The truth is that you can't. What the USA Today article said. How can you become a corpse if you weren't a living person to begin with?
Well, just so you know, Will County Sheriff's deputies, they are having a big press conference today at 1:30 to talk about this case, and we'll see who shows up. I mean, it'll be interesting. I'm going to watch all the local news tonight just to make sure, that this story is being covered.
Yeah, silence and euphemism are like, they should be alarm bells. They should be moral alarm bells. When somebody can't speak the words, when you see pro-abortion people tearing down signs because they have pictures of fetuses, when you see them trying to ban the new incredible film they can take of the baby developing in the womb, why? Why can't we face the truth? If you can't face the truth, there's got to be a reason. There's got to be a reason that you're ashamed to look reality in the eye. I mean, the thing that's frightening about this is a society can live a completely happy life while committing atrocities. You can hold slaves, and the people who are not slaves are going to live a happy life. You really have to look at yourself morally, not just are things working. You can't just ask the question, are things working? Is the economy great? Is my life going well? Am I sitting out on the veranda sipping mint juleps? You have to think, are we doing the right thing? And I find it very frightening that our society gets better and better. We get richer and richer. We get more and more peaceful. We have more and more wonderful technology, and we're killing millions and millions and millions of babies every year around the world. And I just think that that's a very frightening situation, because you can become calloused. You can become unfeeling about something that's going on that really is a bad thing that society is doing and needs to stop. And it takes a revolution of thought. It takes a way of thinking, well, what are we going to do about these babies? What are we going to do about these suffering mothers who are pregnant and they didn't mean to be, or pregnant by no fault of their own, or just in a terrible economic situation? How are we going to help them? How are we going to make life viable, not just for the baby, but for everyone involved?
Yeah, the what happens on my watch question, right? And you also have this other sickness in the culture where you see Gen Zers like those that testified before a House committee yesterday, to teenagers telling us that the world's going to end in 10 years and we're not doing enough about that, and they're angst-ridden because they've been told by adults for the 16 years of their life that the world's going to end, and then people wonder why they're angst-ridden. But they want to save the world, but they despise humanity. The same people that want to save the world are ZPGers, zero population growth people. They're pro-abortion, of course. They despise their fellow man and woman, but they have grandiose visions for saving the planet, and that's how they answer the "what I'm doing on my watch" question.
It really is a question of humanism. People usually think of humanism as an atheistic philosophy, but I don't think of it that way at all. I believe, mankind is the pinnacle of earthly creation, and I think that when you think about policies, when you think about what you want for the future, you should be thinking about mankind first. There's only one interesting thing about the Earth. The Earth is just a piece of rock. The only interesting thing about the Earth is that we live here. We who appreciate beauty, we who experience love, we who experience consciousness, who can know God. That's the only thing that matters about this piece of rock that happens to be floating in the middle of nowhere. And so when we talk about saving the Earth, which I'm all in favor of, and I'm certainly in favor of keeping our environment clean and livable, but when we talk about that, we're trying to talk about making the world good for people, And when these guys tell us that, we've got to stop having children, my feeling is we should have as many children as we possibly can, and if we need a new planet to go to, let's get on a rocket ship and go to a new planet. It's life comes first, human life comes first, everything else is secondary. And I think that you're absolutely right about this. It's an entire philosophy that is anti-human. It's anti-human. It's always posed in terms of compassion. It's always posed in terms of caring about the environment, caring about this, caring about that. But it's ultimately anti-life and anti-human, and it comes up in every possible aspect of the expression of basically leftist philosophy.
Well, right, and as Pope said, not Francis, but why am I blanking on his name? But anyway, Pope Benedict said, right, that the devil doesn't present himself as evil; he presents himself as a false good, and that's what the left does.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. The guy that was one of the most brilliant men of our time, and that is exactly right. Yeah.
He is Andrew Clavin. He's a podcaster. Another Kingdom is in season 2. You want to download that podcast. Also, screenwriter for the movie Gosnell, The Trial of America's Biggest Serial Killer, which you can get on the streaming services if you haven't already seen it. And now's a good time to do so.